My name's Helena Tavares-Kennedy. I'm a program consultant to the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. You can see today's agenda here. We have a few quick announcements. I wanted to point out that this webinar is being recorded. So if you do have to drop off early, this 1 hour webinar will be recorded and available to all the attendees. Throughout the webinar, feel free to type in your questions in the questions panel in Zoom. We'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. First, let's give a quick shout out to Ecovadis for being a webinar sponsor, so we can offer these valuable webinars to all of you at no cost. So thank you, Ecovadis, and we'll hear from David at Ecovadis in a minute. Also wanted to point out, speaking of these awesome free webinars that SPLC hosts, join us for the next webinar on November 18th at 12 noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. We're going to hear from experts on climate-friendly refrigerants and the role of procurement. So you can, this is a live link that will be in the PDF that we send out to attendees. And you can also go to the SPLC website, our Twitter page, our LinkedIn page. There's links to the registration page all over. So worst comes to worst, just contact me and we'll get you squared away. So I'm really excited to introduce our speakers today. We're going to hear from Sarah O'Brien, which many of you probably already know from SPLC. Sarah is responsible for ensuring that SPLC's many programs empower procurement and supply chain professionals around the globe to successfully implement high-impact sustainable purchasing practices. And she's going to give us a quick scoop on SPLC's latest work today. We'll also hear from David McClintock at Ecovadis, who I mentioned is a sponsor to allow these webinars to remain free for all of you. Ecovadis has business sustainability ratings and actionable scorecards that provide insights into environmental, social, and ethical practices in supply chains across 190 purchasing categories and 150 countries. And he's going to introduce and give a high-level overview of the white paper themes today. We'll also hear from Betsy Hayes, Chief Procurement Officer, and Melissa Peck, both from Minnesota State, who will share specific examples from each of the 6 themes in the white paper, how they handled the cases, challenges they faced, etc. Melissa assists the state with making purchases that demonstrate the highest level of environmental, social, and economic responsibility. And Betsy, as Chief Procurement Officer, has 20 years of public procurement experience with the state and is responsible for directing the state's procurement office that acquires goods and services in excess of $3 billion annually, so no small number. So let's jump in and get started with Sarah, who is going to tell us a little bit about SPLC.
Sure. Thanks, Helena, and thanks so much to Melissa, Betsy, and Dave for joining us today. I'm going to just give a little introduction to the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. For those of you who are not familiar with us, welcome. For all of our members and others who have participated in these before, welcome to you as well. The Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council is focused on guiding and connecting our members toward a socially just and environmentally sustainable purchasing future. Let's see, next slide. Helena, are you running the slides now?
Nope, you got it.
Okay, got it. Sorry, it just needed to turn over. Sorry.
Yeah, you just need to click there on the from current slide.
Yes, I'm just, sorry, can you run the slides? I can't get it to actually enlarge enough for me to click on the from current slide.
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry, folks. So next slide. Yeah, that's not where we were.
Keep going.
Yes.
This is where we were, I think.
Yes, apologies. A little confusion in our slide conglomerating. So the reason that the SPLC exists is to help our 165 plus organizational members with their $300 billion annually of spend to direct their spend dollars, spend francs, spend euros to aligned and impactful purchasing solutions. So we work together. The refrigerants session that we'll do next week was developed by a group of our members looking at refrigeration management, which is one of the key solutions to climate change. And we create a program together to guide, measure, and recognize leadership. Next slide. Our broad membership coalition I've mentioned. Obviously, you can see familiar logos back there. We work with a number of distinguished organizations at the very height of the Fortune 100, down to the smallest cities, counties, community colleges. And we really try to meet our members where they are, support them in developing a program approach to sustainable purchasing, a strategic approach, and really drive change through every bit of procurement that they do, sending signals to the marketplace for more sustainable solutions. Next slide. I won't go into depth, particularly since we've taken a little time with confusion on our programs and resources, but I encourage you to visit our website at sustainablepurchasing.org. Our key programs focus on guidance, coaching, category resources, program assessment, and creating buyer, supplier, and advocate connections throughout our incredible network of members. So I encourage you to email us at info@sustainablepurchasing.org. You can reach out to me directly and really consider how you can take advantage of the resources and programs that we have to vault you into a new category of effectiveness and impact for your sustainable procurement program. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Dave thank you, Dave, to Ecovadis for the sponsorship, and I'm going to give you the introductory moment here.
Thank you, Sarah, and really, hello, everyone. Ecovadis has been a really proud sponsor and supporter of SPLC since its beginnings, and we're really pleased to see this project come to fruition, this paper, to help sustainable procurement champions in the public sector organizations like Betsy and Melissa and all of the people in the panel and the paper, and hopefully all of you in the audience as well, to galvanize action on sustainable purchasing in your organizations. I think that the paper covers, basically acknowledges that despite the many legal and policy mandates to integrate sustainability into public purchasing, actually getting that impact, getting the behaviors changed is tough, and it doesn't just happen automatically. So the paper covers and our discussion today, the key leverage points where you can link sustainable public purchasing to the top departmental and organizational priorities. You should be clarifying program objectives and responsibilities, simplifying adoption with easy to use tools and processes, and measuring and communicating the key benefits and big wins. So I think you're going to get a lot of that focus in the presentation today. Our focus at Ecovadis has been specifically on supplier practices and engagement with our, that end of the challenge, providing reliable scorecards on supplier sustainability practices and their management systems. So we have a rating on 4 different themes on a 0 to 100 scale with benchmarks. And ultimately, we're trying to embrace a performance-based approach to help drive improvements in those practices. And I think that's at the other end of the spectrum because, SPLC, we're trying to complement their offering, which covers, a lot of, basically everything else, as Sarah said, and the resources are there on the website. We're really pleased to see we're having some signs of progress, although we got our start in the private sector and we've been kind of battle testing the solution over a dozen years there. We now are really encouraged to see it brought to bear on the public sector. We have some of your fellow members in the SPLC, such as the University of California, who are also featured in the paper, and also Fairfax County. And there are other members at SPLC in the private sector like J&J and Nielsen and Edelman. And also HP are a very advanced rated company. So reach out to them if you want to know what their experience has been. And I encourage you also to check out the resources in the SPL Insight Rate the Raters work, which they did starting a few years ago, to rate different rating systems and compare Ecovadis to them. So that's member accessed content. So definitely contact SPLC if you want to get in, join, and get access to that. The last thing I wanted to mention, we have done a lot of innovation since that whole work started. We now have a Ecovadis IQ, predictive risk mapping, as well as now we've just announced the carbon action module solution for going deep on driving improvements. So I think we want to keep innovating, so please contact us. We want to hear from the public purchasing champions and to see how we can make our solution more adapted to you. But enough of that. Let's go on with the presentation at hand, and I'll hand it back to you, Sarah, and Betsy, and Melissa.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. And it's true. One of the key stakeholders is all of our suppliers. When we're working with purchasers, those suppliers need that same education and engagement. And Ecovadis has provided solutions for that for, as Dave says, many years now. So let me see, Helena, if you want to give me the traction again. Let's go to the next slide. But if you want to hand over to me, then I think I can get this going.
All right.
We will
Brought
see.
you back to that.
Yeah. Yes, it did bring me back
So
to
just
that.
click on
From current slide, but I can't.
From current slide, and that should get you there.
Yep.
There you go.
I am. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay. I now seem to have control. So I'm not going to do all of the animation on this slide, but I wanted to give a little bit of background about the way the SPLC thinks of procurement, sustainable procurement. We encourage folks to take a strategic approach, develop their maturity, develop the depth with which they treat different topics. So this is just an example of moving from, starting out, you might say, okay, we're going to identify some metrics for sustainable procurement. We're going to say we're buying X recycled content, or we're reducing carbon emissions from these 4 categories by this much. That's great. That's a great starting place. Over time, we look for and we support through our coaching a more comprehensive, more strategic, more effective and impactful approach. So when we talk about this, we often think about it as a maturity path. Sorry, there's a long delay. So in this instance, when we talk to a number of our public sector purchasers, they said, yeah, growing internal stakeholder engagement is the most critical starting point and the sort of ongoing task of the public procurement lead, often without a large team, without a large budget, but with a great bully pulpit sort of situation where you can reach out to stakeholders. You're empowered to do so. But when you do so, you need to understand how to really bring them in, get them to care, to participate, and to support your program. Now, I'm not even going to read this slide. This is just tossed in here. Probably if any of you are sustainable procurement leads in a large organization, whether public or private, you find these same kind of pushback, excuses or complaints or just reluctance or anxiety. And so what we wanted to do was talk with experts in this area. We did this last year together with Ecovadis, worked on a private sector white paper. And there we found that much of the dialogue between the sustainable procurement lead was with C-suite, was a dialogue up and down, and was about obtaining resources. When we looked at the public sector, we reached out to our members who work with Angela Shell, Chief Procurement Officer of the state of California, Betsy with the state of Minnesota, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and a number of cities and the University of California, because again, we wanted that lived experience. How do you really move this stuff? How does this really get done? And today we're joined by Melissa and Betsy. Thank you so much, you guys. So the bottom line from our experts was that really the real work of making the case happens more on the front lines than in the executive office. You're not necessarily going to be in touch with the governor's office constantly. There's a mandate either through an executive order or through a legislative mandate. That's already the bottom line. What really matters is bringing people in, encouraging people to collaborate, and building your program in that way. So Betsy and Melissa, thanks for turning on your cameras. We're going to try something a little bit different with this webinar, which is to have a conversation. Betsy and Melissa both have years of experience with building a sustainable procurement program, and we thought that they could usefully bring in some stories from the fray, from the front lines, to illustrate some of the takeaways that our experts generally shared with us. So thanks for experimenting with us, and we'll see how it goes. So first of all, and this is very much, dear to the SPLC heart, it's develop and share a strategic approach. So try and frame up your organization's sustainability imperatives, sustainable procurement imperatives, as a big picture strategic initiative that's aligned with other state, city, organizational goals, and then talk about how the activities that you're asking people to participate in will help you get to that large goal. We're going to give out these slides. So we do have these details pulled from the white paper, but I think rather than me reading through them, why don't we go to Betsy and or Melissa to talk about that, kind of conveying that big picture and the importance of it to your stakeholders.
Sure. I can jump in first and just say that one of the ways that we really work to keep the big picture in focus is we early on back in 2013, we got an EPA grant and we took a look at all of our contracts because, as you were introducing, Betsy, you mentioned that we purchase about $3 billion annually in goods and services, and that is a ton of contracts to try to consider. So we wanted to narrow that down and really be strategic, and we were able to find with that EPA grant money specific contracts that might have an outsized environmental impact. And we decided, maybe that's where we should be focusing our efforts. So we have 19 priority contracts that we really focus on in order to place our resources where they'll be best utilized in order to have an outsized impact. Once we had that information, we took it and we kind of built on that momentum and really, I guess you could say map to our mandates if you're looking at these bullets. And we built a charter which includes our kind of charter team, the Office of State Procurement and the Municipal Pollution Control Agency's mission. And it provides additional information about how we're going to get to our goals. We have an executive order that the charter is built on. And that, as Betsy likes to say, we kind of jumped onto those executive orders and let them pull us forward. So we had those laid out, and then and that's more of our policy. And we also created a framework that looks more specifically at how are we going to do what we say we're going to do. So we have that high level kind of big picture document, the charter that's signed by leadership. And then on top of that, we have a framework that says we're going to do research, we're going to do vendor engagement, we're going to do measurement. These are the ways we're going to reach the goals that we've laid out.
So again, it's all kind of converging on that big picture so that rather than seeming like randomized activities, it's all contributing to that sort of in a roadmap kind of way to that overall objective.
Absolutely. So we have kind of the objectives stated, we have the roadmap in the framework, and then we have the priority contracts that we're really using to get to kind of those areas that we're using on the road, to work with that analogy.
Yep. And I would add Well, first, I want to start off by thanking both Ecovadis and SPLC for having us today. Good afternoon, everybody. It's exciting to see so many of my colleagues in the public sector really getting excited and engaged in the sustainability space. And this white paper, I think, does a good job of kind of reflecting that momentum that's happening. But Melissa talked about the framework and how we sort of structurally have things set up. But one of the things that's really important about a strategic approach is really connecting with the individuals who are implementing the program, and giving them the incentive and the motivation. And part of folks who are kind of students of engagement and the concept of employee engagement know that often it's not really money or other things that are a huge driving force. It's really people's feeling about how their work is connected to the bigger picture and how their day-to-day activities are really making a difference. And so that's a huge part of the strategic approach, is connecting those individuals to this bigger picture. Just as a couple examples, not so much in the sustainability space, but we have a buyer that works with our Department of Natural Resources that purchases helicopters and other airplanes and things. And there was an instance where one of those particular helicopters that was purchased had special equipment that was able to find a lost hunter in the woods. So, you know, it's talking about stories like that and translating that with sustainability. The equivalent kind of story would be talking about the stories of the impacts that the sustainable purchasing has. And we'll talk about kind of later on kind of how to translate those types of things, but it's really important to talk about those things in meetings that you have in, you know, group settings to give people recognition for the impact that they're making. It is really has to be part of your strategic approach.
Which flows perfectly into our next insight that people shared, which was really focus on the results and make sure that you report back to people, you know, as you try and engage people in whatever piece of the puzzle they can provide, then report back to them on what that accomplished, what's concretely happened, like finding the hunter, but also the inspiring nature of what you contributed to this, you know, larger purpose. You know, sharing those successes, I think, just is so rewarding for people to feel that they've contributed to something larger. I apologize. There's such a lag that I think it hasn't happened, and then it does. Okay. So again, the idea of sharing progress, translating the impact of your sustainable purchasing into concrete, trackable data points, which sounds as though that's part of what you've done with your key contracts. And, you know, developing case studies and stories is often really a helpful way to get people engaged and encouraged as they participate, and then maybe to become these champions who love to tell their story for you. You know, at a meeting when somebody else is reluctant, they can stand up and say, "Yeah, I didn't know, but here's what happened when I, you know, jumped in and contributed to this effort." So, and I know that you have some of that in terms of your recognition of collaborators.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that we do this is if you navigate to the Sustainable Purchasing Program's website, which I encourage everybody here to do. We'll talk about it a little bit more here in a couple of slides. And you would find an annual update is what we call it, because report is something different in the legislature. So we can't call it a report, but it's our annual update where we talk about our goal, which is the one that's laid out in the executive order, it's 25% of our purchases will be on priority contracts will be sustainable by 2025. And so it talks about our progress towards that goal, just at a high level. It talks about our social sustainability goal and our progress towards that. And then it also provides some case studies. So for instance, a couple of years ago, we completely revamped our furniture contract to remove the hazardous handful. We didn't want to have hazardous handful products that contained hazardous handful chemicals in our furniture any longer. So we developed a tiered system to allow for a transition away from those chemicals. And that was a huge undertaking for us. It was something that we collaborated with the Center for Environmental Health on. We also collaborated with other agencies outside of, our normal collaborations. So we collaborated with MinCor, which is a correctional facility manufacturer in the state of Minnesota. And it was just a wonderful project, and it turned out really, really well. So that was one of the successes that we wanted to talk about in terms of sustainable purchasing. So yeah, I think that that's really one of the ways that we document our tangible results. And we want to talk about those examples and really laud the individuals involved in that. So the individual that we collaborated with at MinCor we wouldn't have been able to do this without him. He was invaluable to the experience. And so really just giving him the credit, being able to quote him in saying that it was a great experience and that he feels MinCor gained a lot from it. That is what we need in order to gain the support of other staff that we need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, Betsy, that also works well for you with the governor's office or whomever else is kind of wanting to promote Minnesota's environmental accomplishments.
Right. I think it's really important too, as far as translating results, that you do so in a way that people understand. I mean, I'm a person who may not really grasp what a megawatt is or what a metric ton really means. So if you say something like, if you're reducing greenhouse emissions, for example, you're translating that to say that that's equivalent to taking, a certain number of passenger vehicles off the road for a year. Or if you're saving on electricity, that's enough to power X number of households. Mm-hmm. When you're talking metric tons, how many semi-trucks does that equate to? So, it's really just my preference to put things in plain language so that you can translate that. And then on this subject too of focusing on results and talking about cultivating champions, I think it's really important that people lead from all positions. It's not really just a reliance on your leadership in your department or your organization, but it's critical that every individual really has some defined role. We in Minnesota, we're very intentional about listing sustainability related items in everyone's position descriptions so that they all feel involved and have some ownership over it. And we find that doing that really excites a lot of the, especially younger millennials. So it's helpful for our recruiting and retention efforts to show that we're really focused on this and this is part of everyone's role. So we have champions at every level and we take every opportunity really to get people out talking about our program and our achievements.
That's great. And we have a question about recruiting purchasers to be independently active, and we will get to that in the Q&A. That's always a question with large systems in particular, is how can we get folks, kind of picking up the task and moving it down the field. Let's see. Now, here's one that I recall very well when I used to work, when I initially worked in environmentally preferable purchasing a long time ago, was, use sustainable procurement where you can to help people solve problems. So shift the focus from, this is like a bolt-on that I have to add to my procurement, and instead try and look for those opportunities where a more sustainable option is also, say, healthier for workers, or addresses an issue of, chemical exposure. I used to work with hospitals, so the issue of patients or nurses feeling, having asthmatic reactions to cleaning chemicals and things. Anytime you can solve a problem with your sustainable procurement, you're ahead of the game. And I'm sure you all have examples of that, Betsy, probably back in the early days of the program where people were like, I'm not interested until it fixed something for them.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to, solving problems, I guess starting at the beginning, you really have to understand what the problems are. So as far as kind of addressing this area, we recognized that we had to get in quick and early into a procurement process where we're meeting with the agencies early on about understanding their business needs, and really trying to figure out what problems are there that they need to solve that we can help them. And we have had some really good insight and approaches from that. And I think, Melissa, you've got a couple of really good examples where we've learned some things about really kind of learning the hard way. But tell us about those types of things, Melissa.
Sure. So yeah, every time we hold a stakeholder group to discuss one of the contracts that we're resoliciting, we always gain a ton of insight from the buyers and the vendors, just about what can be done and what they want to be done. And oftentimes that goes off without a hitch, and we are able to get them what they want when they want it in a sustainable way. So it's a great approach. Generally, one example of a kind of a lesson learned for us, I think, is just generally to watch out, I guess, for how we spec things. The example I'm thinking of was around chemical cleaners, which you had mentioned, Sarah, and avoiding restrictive RFPs to the extent possible to foster innovation, I think, was the biggest takeaway from this lesson, because we had engaged stakeholders and said, hey, we're looking at the cleaning chemical contract. What are your concerns? What are you looking for? And one of the things that they were interested in is a plumbed in system that dispenses cleaning solution. And it does it without needlessly exposing workers to those chemicals. And it's a less toxic alternative to some of the chemical cleaners that you see, because it's undergoing actually a chemical process to produce the cleaning solution. And we're like, wow, that is fantastic. Less packaging, check. Less toxic exposure, check. This sounds fabulous all the way around. If you guys want it, let's figure out how to do it. Well, it turns out that we have a couple of different ways of, or we have a couple of different contracts that would fit into, one of which is just the cleaning chemicals, but then there's the mechanical component to it too, right? So you have to plumb the system in, and that would require contractors to plumb it in. So we just weren't really able to make that work despite our best efforts and everybody's interest in it. So hopefully next time around that can be made a reality, but just beware that even with the best of intentions, sometimes things will go awry. But there are definitely a lot of great ways that you can create a gain and make sustainability simpler through just engaging and saying, what can we do for you? What are the pain points that you're seeing with this contract?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're such interesting. The other thing that is very much a part of this is that convening of stakeholders, and often you'll find the waste handling people have a big problem with a product, but they've never actually talked to procurement about it. So they just, have this struggle at end of life. Either it's, has to be have special handling, or it's just building up warehouses full of cardboard boxes, or whatever the issue is. And so having that sort of life cycle understanding of what happens to that product, where is it stored, how is it worked with, who deals with it, is just critically important. And uncovering those opportunities, and often sometimes even if you're lucky, cost savings as well. We don't have to handle this as hazardous waste. It's a huge cost savings on something that otherwise might seem more costly.
Yeah, it's really important, as a procurement person to structure your RFPs in such a way in your process so that you've got opportunities for that kind of input and discussion. We see that there's generally such a need and an old traditional approach of being in control, of telling people exactly what you need, and these are our specs, and this is what we want. And it really, the primary purpose of an RFP really should be to set forth the challenge and then let that innovation come through. That's why we're looking to third parties to provide for us, is so that they can bring in that innovation that we may not even know is out there. So we have to be open to that. And a lot of times we hinder our options by just the way we've structured our process and our documents.
Mm. And particularly in the public realm, where much of that is very regimented, right? So it takes creative thinking to refit it.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is a little bit, this was interesting because the stories under these 2 points are a little bit different. This is quite similar to sharing that big picture strategy, but I think this one really is more about helping people make the personal connection to sustainable procurement. What does this really mean? Yes, as you were saying, Betsy, I think a little bit, greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. Well, that's great. But what does that actually mean? And if people can see something, this sort of impact close by on flooding, or some way to just connect that to their personal experience and their desire to help, and to make a better world altogether, it's just a hugely helpful piece of the picture.
Yeah, one of the things we do in this area about sharing our program is we. Like I mentioned earlier, we try to be as visible as possible. We recruit kind of leaders from within our organization to talk about the program. But I think one thing we've recognized is we don't have to search for environmentally focused events or programs to talk about sustainability. Remember, sustainability is that three-legged stool. It's got the economic component, it's got the social component, as well as the environmental. So we have made an intentional connection with our diversity and inclusion office. And so a lot of their events, we are partnering with them to make sure that sustainability is a part of that supplier diversity conversation. It's really critical. Our small businesses, our diverse businesses understand and are able to have an equal playing field when it comes to our environmental focused requirements in our processes. So our supplier diversity area, they do a lot of outreach, and SPLC's actually helped us quite a bit in that area with a workshop that SPLC did a few years back that was geared specifically towards our small businesses. That was really well received for educational purposes. So that's one area, one tip that I think I'd offer about sharing the program's purpose.
Yeah, that's a great point, Betsy. And Sarah, I really liked the way you kind of explained the difference between this one and the one before, because I love this point, give them reasons to believe. Like, how can you personally connect with, these staff who by all rights should genuinely care about this program. It's impacting you where you lived in a lot of places. And we are currently developing a training deck that we're hoping we can put into video format here shortly. But in that training deck, we have a lot of examples with how our sustainable purchasing guidelines align with shared values that our staff have. So let's see, I have the deck up just so I can give some specific examples. So PFAS, specifically per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, they're a huge concern in Minnesota. Not a lot, but enough of our drinking water in our East Metro is contaminated with this terrible, no good, very bad chemical. And talking to people, staff members, about how, our foodware that is purchased off contract, if we weren't specifying for specifically PFAS-free foodware, it would have PFAS. Our children are using these plates because public schools purchase off of that contract, right? Do you want your kids eating, thyroid disrupting chemicals? Probably not. I mentioned the drinking water thing. We have a map in the training that shows all the wells that we're monitoring for PFAS, just to show like, hey, if you live anywhere near here, this is the chemical that we're talking about. So even just to go a little bit further than that, we like to talk about how sustainability can increase cost effectiveness, right? Because we want to be fiscally responsible with taxpayer money. And I think that, you know, everybody in the purchasing department is completely bought into that. We all totally understand the need for fiscal responsibility and to make sure that we are getting the best product for the lowest price. But the lowest price isn't always like the lowest price, right? If we look at it from a life cycle perspective and think about, you know, especially things like electronics, where if you get a more durable product and you can hold on to it longer, it's going to be cheaper and it's going to be better for the environment. So just kind of pointing out some of those overlapping end goals, I think, is really important to showing how this is, you know, this should be something you care about.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think that a lot of these relate to, Betsy, what you were saying, which is that respect for people at all levels who are contributing through their various roles to this overall goal. Gosh, this does this every time. I apologize. I click it once. So this is a simple one, and Melissa, you teed this up perfectly, demonstrating and communicating savings. I mean, cost savings are king, whether it's public sector or private sector, but I think that what the sustainable purchasing folks can bring to the table is that life cycle understanding, that looking at total cost of ownership, looking at waste costs, for example, looking at other issues that aren't necessarily in purchasing's view in the traditional sense. So really showing how buying something in a different form, in a different, getting a service instead of a product, a number of other approaches can really help with cost savings in a significant way. And
yeah, you know, as far as kind of the taking the credit where credit is due, you know, you're right, Sarah, that that in fact, one of the slides at the very beginning of the PowerPoint was kind of the complaints and the excuses that people have. And of course, everyone's heard it before that I'd love to be more sustainable in my purchasing, but I just can't afford it. It's going to cost more. And so we need to make visible those instances, the many instances where you have solutions that are actually less expensive. In Minnesota, our sustainable janitorial paper supplies are cheaper than less sustainable counterparts. We've also seen electronics, especially if you look at the life cycle costing, are actually a better value overall than less sustainable alternatives. So, you know, one thing in the public sector, I think it's fair to say that we aren't incredibly sophisticated in doing life cycle costing analyses. I think that's something that you know, especially it's traditional with our bid type systems where we're focused on the low price. In fact, some jurisdictions are legislatively required to award to the low bid and aren't really using the best value analysis that just statutorily don't have that flexibility. I think that's changing. Minnesota was lucky that we had best value authority very early on back in, I think it was 1998 or so that we received that legislative authority to consider factors beyond price. But, you know, definitely looking into the life cycle costing helps you make the case on the basis of price.
And often you can find public calculators for different categories that have been developed by advocates or stakeholder groups to help make that case for cost savings overall, which, as you say, sometimes you don't necessarily have someone to tap to go set up that equation for you. Mm-hmm. But if it's provided, it's certainly very useful information. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a final one, and this is definitely key to that, to the ability of to get more buy-in? How steep is the hill they have to climb, making sustainable purchasing easier? And there are a number of ways that different folks on our expert panel conveyed this. But I think that, this is the question that came up in the Q&A as well. How do you set up systems, tools, access so that individual procurement professionals can fulfill their sustainability commitments without having to pull in Melissa or having to go do a big research project? And I know this is relevant to both public and private. The more we can enable purchasing staff, the broader the activity will be. So I don't know if you all have some systems that you have in place that help with this, or specific ways that you've addressed it.
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. So we do use third-party certifications when possible. That's something that I would usually do the research on generally, but would it be possible for me to just quick share my screen? I pulled up our website and I can show you guys. So
I think so.
All right, I'll do it. I'm doing it.
Helena has to do that.
Oh, I can't share screen while other participant is sharing.
So Helena, can you unshare mine? And
yes, let me.
This is the end. So let's go to Melissa.
I don't mean to make things more difficult.
No, sure. Melissa, you should have control now. It should pop up a little thing asking you if that's okay. Sorry, it took a minute for me to unmute myself.
It says I'm controlling it. But...
Oh, okay. Hang on a second. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Okay.
It doesn't allow you to share your screen?
That's okay. You know what? I'll just put the website in the chat box.
That sounds perfect. Then people can go there.
So definitely go here if you would like. We have some great information on our website. We put a lot of time and effort into it. We have information for government, our government partners, including our cooperative purchasing venture members, on how to incorporate sustainability into different product categories. And then we have resources for vendors just on how to be more competitive in state contracts, especially around sustainability. And we help provide a little bit more information on like what are third-party certifications, what are we asking for in the specs. And then, as I was mentioning, we have priority contracts. Oh, hey, thank you.
There it is.
I think that's the website, right?
That is the website. I was looking at it on my screen, so I didn't even see that you had shared it. But yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit, you see these priority contracts. So if I were an agency buyer, I can go here. And if you want to click on it, that would be great. Awesome. And scroll down a little bit more. And you can see here that we have all of these different contracts and these contract release numbers in different product categories. And if you click on one of these, it says specifically what we're doing for sustainability. So here, all cleaning products must be certified with Green Seal. So somebody can say like, okay, well, I'll look for the Green Seal ones, right? That's what I need to do if they weren't already required. That's one way that we do try to automate things as much as possible for buyers, is just making them, making sustainability specs required on contracts, master contracts. So then buyers can just go in and say, okay, well, I can buy whatever I want to because all is said and good. Obviously, if you don't have a centralized system, that's not always possible. But yeah, I think that this is one of the best ways that we can really speak to that, though. Yeah.
And one thing that's really helpful about the availability of the specifications is it helps the vendors and our suppliers really have an advanced look at what's coming, so that they're not, oftentimes, especially smaller businesses don't have the time to really look at the specs and then try to see if what they can do in the short time frame that the procurement is happening. If they can have the time in advance to take a look at the requirements, it really helps put them on a better level playing field to compete with the bigger businesses. The other thing from a technology standpoint that we've done recently is to obtain a reporting tool. It used to be that we would have our suppliers and vendors report to us really in any way they could, some as far as usage reports that would come in quarterly, and we were dealing with everything from Excel spreadsheets to paper that was sent in. So now, and this is a bit of a nod to the state of Massachusetts, who really got the ball rolling with automation of those types of things and have shared a lot of information. And we kind of I'll shamelessly copied them and have that reporting tool stood up. So that's been really helpful to us. And then on the same line about making things easier, again, I would just stress getting involved and working with the agencies early. You don't want to have sustainability requirements, or you don't want to be negotiating them after a vendor's selected and have that come on as an afterthought. It's got to be part of the process so that there aren't surprises, and that really will make it a lot easier as you go through the process if you start early.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, having the bank of specifications is so useful, so that people aren't calling you, Melissa, the day of, the award to say, well, what am I supposed to be looking for? and you just allow them to cut to the chase and know what to integrate, what to ask, and then what to reward in terms of a given solicitation. So that's our 6 insights and conversations around them. Apologies for our slight technical difficulties, but thanks for everyone for hanging out and staying with us. So in terms of the structure, it seems that, one of the issues in the public sector continues to be that there's still, we're moving toward providing more information, decentralizing, allowing purchasers to integrate this into contract processes. But there's still this notion of, well, but we need that one expert. We need that Melissa who's going to be on tap for everybody to call. And I wonder, in terms of, your thinking, Betsy, as you're kind of strategically, moving toward ever greater maturity on this program, as to how you're devolving some of that responsibility to the purchasers and getting them to kind of take it up.
Yeah, I would like to say that we've really moved to that next level where we do have more independence and greater expertise, but we are really still quite reliant on our partners with our with the designated experts. But there are increasingly more better access to information, whether it's through forums, through SPLC, or whether it's through NASPO related resources for individual buyers to become educated. And I think really a lot of that is very much an individual thing. And as we see, I think more and more we're seeing people who really have a passion for this area and are taking it upon themselves to become educated. And so with that really becomes a less reliance on that one designated expert such as Melissa, but I don't think we'll ever really make it without Melissa. I can't imagine, but
you guys got this. Just to add to that a little bit. What I've seen, I guess, since I've been here is that I'll work with an individual buyer on a contract, and then they'll have a good experience and, enjoy the kind of sustainability aspect of it and being able to talk about it. And then they'll come to me and say, hey, I have this contract up. I was thinking this. What do you think? So there is some initiative, being taken. Maybe it's not completely independent yet, but the ball is definitely moving that direction, which is exciting, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, yeah, I think that's what we see across the board is that, younger people and people generally are sort of alert to issues. How could we not be of environmental and social sustainability and equity and, all of the things all of the chickens that are coming home to roost right now. So that enthusiasm or that openness, I think, is very different from perhaps when I started doing environmental purchasing with states 20 years ago, when it was still very much like, oh, this is outside our responsibility. It feels as though people are bringing their whole selves to work, and perhaps their passion for social and environmental improvement and health.
Yeah, and it's really important from a leadership perspective to support those efforts and those initiatives, and not place burdens upon people, and try to, especially when you ask, when an agency, when do you need this particular product, or when do you need this contract in place, it's always yesterday. And so sometimes these added efforts that people want to make and are passionate about get quashed because of the barriers and things that are thrown up. And so as a leader, it's really important to try to address those and try to provide the right encouragement environment and processes that don't kind of quell the spirits involved. So, yeah.
Can I just jump in really quickly? It looks like Melissa Magler, not Melissa Peck, Melissa Magler, she's asking if Betsy can share a link to the procurement reporting tool that alleviates the challenge of multiple spreadsheets. Betsy, do you have that, or do you want me to, I can send it to the attendees after the webinar if you don't have it handy.
Yeah, Melissa, is that something that we can share, or is that Melissa might know better?
Yeah. So we don't have an actual link that you would be able to access because it's all behind a firewall. But I can give you the name of the company, and you could certainly look them up, and they would be happy to demo for you. I am sure of that. So they are B2G, Business to Government. And they should have a website that you can mess around on. That's how I found out about them.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I could share too is that I mentioned that we had kind of stolen this from another state, and the state, the way we found out about it is the state put in for it was a nomination for what's called a Cronin Award, which is the top procurement related award for public procurement organizations, and they were one of the top 3 awards based on this environmental reporting tool. And so there's a whole kind of a paper about it that I know is available that I can provide. If this, if we want to take note who to get this to, I can find that.
Sure.
And it talks a lot about how the tool works and what they've been able to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very helpful in terms of very specific product related improvements in environmental performance and so forth for the state. And that is, there's more information on that Massachusetts initiative in the white paper, which Helena, I see, has put the white paper link into the chat. And the B2Gs, well, maybe we can provide a link one-to-one to that if that's a challenge to find. But I think the thing is, as the field of sustainable procurement becomes more advanced, tools like this, like Ecovadis' rating tool, which is a kind of enterprise level rating for suppliers, so more of a supplier qualification system, the B2G for reporting and assessing performance under sustainability requirements. All of these tools are not only proliferating but becoming more sophisticated and advanced. So, where possible, it's great to tap into some of those insights. I know a lot of states and organizations are building their own tools, but sometimes when you look at the immense heavy lift of building your own tool versus a third-party tool, you may find that the off-the-shelf, ready-to-go model works well for you, as you guys found with the B2G. And Dave, you can speak to your to the University of California and others, being able to leverage your tool to do a lot in terms of supplier screening and understanding and engaging with suppliers on sustainability. So that is more than the end of our call. Thanks so much to you all for joining us, and we will send out the link to the white paper, link to some of these additional resources. Thanks so much to our speakers. I really put you on the spot and appreciate your coming through with flying colors, and thanks to Ecovadis for the sponsorship, and to Helena for organizing everything. Really a great conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. All right.